From the CBS 4 Sports Studio in Northwest Gainesville, here's Gainesville Game Day. Sponsored by G. Bradley Insurance Agency, the right team for all of your insurance needs. Now, here's Gainesville Sun columnist Pat Dooley and CBS 4's own Sarah Cardona.
Okay, welcome into another edition of Gainesville Game Day. I'm Pat Dooley, the sports columnist of the Gainesville Sun, joined by Sarah Cardona, who from CBS 4, who's going to be here all year with us, and we're excited about having her.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
And obviously, we saw a game. Finally, we have something to talk about as far as a game goes. It was a wild and crazy game. It was a weird game, too.
Yeah, it was definitely very wild. We saw a little bit of everything from fake field goals to fake punts, lots of penalties. Had a little bit of everything.
Yeah, a lot of too much is what we had 3 fire alarms in the press box.
We did.
That was pretty much everything you could ask for, and most importantly, Florida got the win, although you wouldn't know that talking to some Gator fans. We will get to that, but right now we have to go around the Southeast.
It's time for Around the Southeast, sponsored by Skyfrog Tree Service.
All right, we start out around the Southeast because we didn't have any games last week other than Florida-Miami, of course. But how good this Miami team might be going forward. Now, they obviously, like Florida, have an open date this week. Their schedule sets up really nice. They even get to play Jim McElwain. That's a positive for them. And I tell you what, I like this team. When I watched that team go out on the field from ground level when I was down there, that looked like a really good college football team. And I think they surprised Florida with how athletic and fast they were.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Jaron Williams actually did a good job. I mean, he didn't throw any interceptions. He had 1 turnover. I thought he did well despite everyone kind of dogging on him, saying that, mostly their coach.
Well, his offensive coordinator said he left a lot of things out there and he was disappointed in him. And I don't think there was any Miami fans who felt that they were disappointed in him.
Right. I personally think that he did really well for his first time.
Absolutely. And I tell you what, barring some strange things, I didn't have Miami in my top 25 going into the season. I voted on the AP poll, but when we vote next week, I think I'm going to stick them in somewhere in the bottom of my top 25.
So we have a few SEC teams playing today. Which game are you looking forward to?
For me, it's Auburn-Oregon. I'm really hoping that's a good game just because it's got the potential to be. Both teams have pretty good offenses, and the big mystery is Auburn. I got a feeling that if Auburn loses this game, it's going to be a long year for Gus Malzahn. So that's the game that is going to get the national attention, and especially for the Pac-12, which needs a big win.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I'm looking forward to Georgia and Vanderbilt. It's going to be in my hometown of Nashville.
Yay.
Georgia's definitely going to walk all over them, but I think it'll still be a good game.
And Georgia sold more tickets than Vandy. I think it's 70-30.
Well, like you said last time, there really are no Vandy fans.
There are no Vandy fans. We found out that FSU, with all those quarterbacks they got in the transfer portal, they're going with a guy who's been there, James Blackman. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. The guy's got an arm. He's really a talented guy, can gun it, and but his big liability was he was so skinny. So I'm looking forward more than anything just to see if he's bulked up a little bit and looks like a college football quarterback instead of a high school quarterback.
Yeah, I was actually very shocked that he beat out the Louisville transfer and Wisconsin transfer. I thought the Wisconsin transfer had it in the bag, so definitely surprised me there.
Alex Hornibrook, yeah, he's had some good games, but
has the most experience.
Couldn't win the job.
Yeah.
Okay, we just went around the Southeast. Now it is time for the starting lineup.
Let's get started with the starting lineup.
Okay, of all the crazy stats in this game, I think the number one crazy stat was that Florida sacked the quarterback 10 times. And it should have been like 12 because even the last play, that was intentional grounding. That should have counted as a sack. But you got to give those guys credit. And one thing that I've told all Gator fans is this. Those guys played their tails off, especially on that defensive line. They called the right blitzes at the right time, but they also just had that relentless effort that Dan Mullen's always talking about.
Yeah, most definitely. That pass rush was definitely very effective. Jaron Williams was under pressure the entire game.
Okay, next up we're going to talk about the two faces of Felipe Franks. And, it's funny, I think he played a better game than a lot of people do. A lot of people were very upset. And part of it is that people don't like to be stressed out like that. They could have had that game comfortable, but the turnovers were bad. The last throw was bad. Felipe did get hit on the play. He said this week he couldn't get anything on it. and that's why it fluttered out there but it almost cost Florida the game. It was more that I think the optics of Felipe jawing with the crowd, posing after his touchdown, those hurt him in a lot of ways. But, I mean, that's just a kid being a kid. He's still just a college student, and I have no problem with that. But I thought, really, he didn't play that poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think at times he looked fantastic. But then at other times, he didn't look like a third-year starter.
No.
He was making mistakes that he shouldn't have been making. I definitely think going over to the Miami crowd, there's just no reason in doing that. This is not your first game. Act like you've been there before.
Well, and the funny thing is we heard all summer that he had matured and he was wrong for shushing the Gator crowd and everything, but it all kind of came back. It's just who he is. You better get used to it. He's your quarterback too, and he's going to be your quarterback for a long time. A lot of people, the next item, thought that this was a week 0 problem. It was not a week 0 problem, which I hate week 0 anyway. But it was a problem of a team playing its first game, and more than anything, it was a problem of two teams with shaky offensive lines, young offensive lines. When you have that, you're going to have a lot of mistakes, a lot of false start penalties, a lot of missed blocks that turned into sacks. So it wasn't a week 0 problem. They had the same amount of practice they always would have before a first game.
Yeah, I definitely think coming back to your first game, you're going to make those mistakes. But you just need to be more disciplined, and I think in their next game, they're going to fix all those mistakes and come out looking stronger and better.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. First games always are sloppy. And I think the problem is because it was so sloppy on both sides, people looked at it as a week 0 problem, but it wasn't. Okay, and our last item at the starting lineup, real quickly, we're going to give grades to the offensive line. I don't think they were as bad as maybe some people. I think it was about a C. They passed, but they're not going to graduate with honors.
Yeah, I would give them a C- just because there was no ground game, and part of that was because of the offensive line.
Okay, so that'll do it for our starting lineup. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll see what's trending on social media, and we'll have our Gator of the Week here on Gainesville Game Day on CBS 4.
Back to the action with Gainesville Game Day.
Welcome back to Gainesville Game Day. Now it's time for Trending on Social.
And now here's what's trending on social.
Alabama has had a hard time staying healthy this training camp as they lose yet another key player on their defense. Linebacker Dylan Moses tore his ACL on Tuesday and will miss the 2019 season. Moses led the Crimson Tide with 86 tackles and was expected to have a big year. Super Bowl champion Rob Gronkowski is finally speaking out about his retirement. He said he was hurt both mentally and physically from football and that it was bringing him down. This comes days after Andrew Luck shocked the nation by retiring for similar reasons. Here is Rob Gronkowski speaking out about their retirement.
But I want to be clear to my fans. I needed to recover. I was not in a good place. Football was bringing me down. And I didn't like it. And I was losing that joy in life, like the joy. I'm sorry right now, but and I was fighting through it. And I knew what I signed up for, and I knew what I was fighting through. And I knew I just have to fix myself.
No surprise here, but Heisman Trophy runner-up Tua Tagovailoa has made the Manning Award watch list. Tua put up impressive numbers last year for the Tide and now holds Alabama's record for passing yards in a season with 3,966, and he also led the SEC with 48 touchdowns. The Texas A&M Aggies are back, which means so is their 12th man. One of their oldest traditions is the Midnight Yell. It's an event held each week a day before the game.
Okay, that was what was trending on social media. Now it's time for us to pick our Gators of the Week.
And now let's find out who's the Gator of the Week.
So the Gator of the Week that I chose was Kadarius Toney. He had 66 yards receiving, and although he only had 3 carries after the game, Dan Mullen said, when you put the ball in his hand, something exciting is going to happen, and I completely agree with him. I think he needs to get more carries the next game.
Yeah, the stiff arm he put on that guy was amazing.
Yeah.
And you know, Dan likes to talk about go-to guys. Or get-it-to guys, and he is definitely a get-it-to guy, and he had a great game. I'm going to go with John Grenard, who, you know, when a guy transfers in, like this kid comes from Louisville, and, you know, he missed all of last year, and I wondered how good he would be. I mean, he's an SEC defensive lineman. There's no doubt about that. He was amazing, and he played with such effort, and I think that is a great thing, a great pickup in the transfer portal for Florida. There's no question about it. But he was only credited with 1.5 sacks, but he had tons of pressures as well. Okay, so those are the players that we picked as our Gators of the week, and there were a lot of options there. Certainly one guy I consider was another defensive lineman, Jabari Zuniga, who had an amazing game, had a couple of sacks as well, and again, was able to pressure him. They took advantage of those 2 Miami freshman tackles, but you know, Miami also kept backs in to block, and they were able to get past them.
Yeah, and if I had to pick someone else, I'm going with Josh Hammond. He had one of the best plays in the game with that 65-yard catch to ultimately get that Gator as a touchdown. So I'm going to go with him.
I don't know if they win the game if that doesn't
Yeah.
happen. So that was a huge play. He ended up with 93 yards, so that's a good start. It's kind of weird that a lot of guys didn't have big games that we thought might going in, but I keep telling people, look, it's a long season. Next game, Josh Hammond maybe get double covered. And that opens it up for Grimes. So they'll be fine certainly at that receiver spot. Okay, so that was what's trending on social media in our Gator of the Week. It's the end of that segment. Now we go to the next segment, which she can't wait for. The Florida Keys for handling a bye week. We'll be back on Gainesville Game Day. Okay, welcome back to Gainesville Game Day here on CBS 4. It is time now. I know you can't wait for this. The Florida Keys.
And now, here are the Florida Keys, sponsored by Tioga Dental and Orthodontics.
All right, the first key for me and during a bye week is to stay healthy and, of course, to stay out of trouble. You know, guys are going to get out this weekend. They're going to have opportunities. Be careful, man. You need to keep you don't have the depth to have guys get in trouble and have to be suspended as they did in the first game with 3 scholarship players suspended. And again, stay healthy. I mean, you want to hit. You know, there's things that they need to do hit-wise, but the way they came out of that game with no injuries was really almost a miracle, as hard a hitting game as that was.
Key number 2.
For me, the second key is going to be working on tackling drills. There were too many missed tackles, and now that you have a bye week, you have to take advantage of that, and definitely an area they need to focus on. Yeah,
you don't want to hit too much during a bye week. You've had a rough camp, but it's a different animal when you go from a lot of touch tackles, you know, the quarterback is wearing a red jersey, and then all of a sudden you have to make tackles. And what we saw in this game was just Florida's 2 all-SEC cornerbacks went to tackle a guy like this. You can't hit a guy with your shoulder and expect him just to fall down. He wants to run right through you. That was really poor. They've got to get better at that. There's no question about it. And tackling drills, I remember this way before you might not have been born yet, but this was Steve Spurrier one time. He wasn't happy with his tackling at the Kentucky game, and he told us all to come out to practice. So we're gonna have tackling drills for the media boys. So we all go out there, and he, like cows, mooing out there to watch it, and they tackled, and we didn't write anything about it. It wasn't that great, but he just wanted the players to be watched and feel some pressure about tackling.
Key number 3.
Okay, my next key is just to ignore all the social media and all the critics and all the stuff that's going on. You know, Felipe talked about this on Tuesday night too. That he's not worried about it. He's not trying to please anybody, but he's just trying to please his teammate, trying to win the games, which is the right thing to say. But you can't worry about it. You won the game. You know, there was video of the locker room. Those guys were celebrating like maniacs. After the game, everybody was really happy. The only people that weren't happy were some of the fans. So you can't worry about whether the fans don't like the style in which you won, don't like the mistakes that you made in your first game, ignore it all. Just go and get ready to play the next game against Tennessee Martin next week.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a win is a win.
Yes, 1-0 is better than 0-1.
Exactly.
I did the math on this. It's not that hard.
Key number 4.
And the fourth key of the week is correcting the bad penalties. They had 2 pass interference calls, one on 4th and 34, one on 3rd and 12. Shouldn't have been made. You definitely have to correct those bad penalties in your next game.
Yeah, you got to just show them the technique that they did, what they did wrong. I mean, these guys are pretty smart. They know what they're doing. But the other thing was the late hits. They had 2 late hits out of bounds that hurt them. They had 2 more that could have been called. So I know the emotions of that game were crazy. It was wild. It was as intense a game as I've ever been around. And I've been around a lot of football. But you can't do dummy things. I mean, effort penalties aren't going to bother you. Sometimes you're going to get false starts. It just happens. But hitting guys out of bounds certainly is something that you've got to get better at. You got to be smarter than just, when the guy's out of bounds. Just don't hit him.
Those are the Florida keys of the week. We'll be back on Gainesville Game Day with our picks.
Okay, welcome back to Gainesville Game Day. It's time to do the picks, and I got to tell you, you're in trouble because I went 2-0 last week and beat Shannon Snell. So I'm ready to see what you have in store.
The Picks, sponsored by G. Bradley Insurance.
Okay, we start out with the game that I think a lot of people are excited about, the Auburn-Oregon game. I know I'm looking forward to it, and I'm curious more than anything to see how good Auburn is. A lot of people believe they could be a playoff team. Their defensive line's unbelievable. They've got good skill guys. I think their defense as a whole, and now we get to see the beginning of the Bo Nix era. The freshman quarterback whose dad, Patrick Nix, broke some hearts over here at the Swamp one season, 1994, I believe it was. But it's going to be really interesting to watch them against Oregon. And Oregon's gotten a lot of pub during the preseason. I'm still not sure how good they are. Their quarterback is really good, though.
Yes, Pat, this is a big game for the SEC. They definitely need to win those early games, so I'm also going with Auburn.
Okay, next up, North Carolina, South Carolina. This game's in Charlotte, and it'll be an interesting game as well because, I talked to Will Muschamp during the offseason. He told me he thought this was the best team he's had at South Carolina. He's got a senior quarterback in Jake Bentley. I think this is a big year for him. I don't think he's in any danger, but I'm going to go with South Carolina because I just think they've got a lot of physical talent, and Will's been always a good recruiter.
All right, and I am going to go with North Carolina. It'll be interesting to see Mac Brown back on the sidelines, and I'm excited to see what they do this year.
Yeah, it will be, but to whether he can kind of turn that thing around because it was a mess at North Carolina. Okay, next up, Georgia Vanderbilt, which is an SEC game in Nashville. We're rare to have an SEC game to kick off the season. I'm kind of excited about it. I hope Vanderbilt can make it competitive, but I think Georgia's going to come out. Georgia's gotten a little bit of disrespect during the offseason. Some people like them as a playoff team, but nobody's picking them to be better and to be better than Alabama. And also, they've heard a lot, Florida's going to catch Georgia this year. I think they're going to come out on fire, and I'm just not sure how good Vanderbilt is. Quarterback could be a real issue for them. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to pick the Dogs.
Well, I'm also going to pick Georgia as well. They have one of the best offensive lines, very stable running backs. I'm excited to see what Jake Fromm does this year. And they're just way too talented of a team to lose to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, the big question is the receivers. We got to see them. They lost all their receivers, so we'll see how well they do. Okay, we also have Ole Miss at Memphis, which is an interesting game. I am glad I'm going to be sitting on my dad's couch in St. Augustine watching this rather than be in the Liberty Bowl, because if you thought Camping World Stadium's bad, the Liberty Bowl is even worse. It's terrible. But I think Memphis has got the talent. Memphis could be the next UCF. They gave them fits last year. That's a really good football team, and I think they'll handle Ole Miss. Although, Ole Miss is to me going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
And I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I think they're a mystery team, and we'll just have to see if their defense got any better over the summer.
All right, finally on the picks, we have Boise State and Florida State. Another interesting game. Obviously, FSU stunk on ice last year. Boise State is a pretty good team. They've got a lot of guys back, but they are starting a freshman quarterback. That's a concern for them. FSU will get after them with their athleticism. I just don't know what to think of FSU anymore. I mean, 7-6, 5-7 the last 2 years. I don't know that they're going to be all the way back this year, and a loss in this game could really be damaging.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see what James Blackman does. He was just named the starting quarterback, so we'll have to see how they look.
I'm picking FSU, and you're picking
Boise State.
All right. I'm rooting for you. Okay, so those are the picks. We'll see how we did. That was another edition of Gainesville Game Day. We'll be back next week. There'll be a Florida game to talk about, and that'll be a lot of fun, and a lot of other big games as we get back to normalcy. You survived the first one?
I did. It went a lot better than I thought, too. So
well, we'll be back next week.
I'll be back.
Yep. Pat Dooley of the Gainesville Sun, Sarah Cardona from CBS 4. Until next week, so long from the Sunshine State.